3-4. Problem solving. Really, the problem solving isn't really a big part of this section in my mind, but really it's just looking at products and quotients of decimals. How do you multiply? How do you divide decimals? So that's really the section. So products and quotients of decimals. And again, really what we're doing is the first part of the notes are how do you multiply decimals? The second part of the notes are how do you divide with decimals? And it's like this. So Roman numeral 1 is multiplying. So multiplying decimals. Here's the two rules. You multiply like normal. So multiply. So that you guys are pretty good at. What I noticed on those RTI tests, because we had to do these earlier this year on the RTI test, it's the second thing that people mess up on. Now that we have decimals, what do you do with the decimals? And here's the key. The decimal point in the answer is the same as if you want to skip the word sum, you can. If it doesn't make sense to you, it's the same as the sum or the total number of decimal places in the, technically the math word is factors, as the factors. If you're looking at factors and you're like, I have no idea what the factors are, you could say the same number of decimal places in the, what I'm going to put in parentheses here, original numbers. And we'll do a couple examples that'll kind of help that make sense. If I would take, I'm going to say my first example, 1 year on Mars is 1.88 times our Earth year. So we're going to figure out, well, how many days do you have for a year on Mars? So if I do the 365.25, that's the number of days in an Earth year if you count like leap year, you know. And then you have times 1.88. We want to multiply those numbers together. So it's going to be a fairly beastly problem for this beginning one. Don't let the size of the problem mess you up. Just take the steps. You just have to do the steps more times to get the final answer here. But this is how I learned it. So we start out with this 8. We're going to take this 8 on the far right. We're going to multiply it by each of those numbers in the top number. Agreed? So first we do the 8 times 5. That gives me 40. So I'm going to put down my 0, and I put my little 4, carry the 4. Then I do my 8 times 2 is 16. And what do we do with the 4? Add the 4, right? So 8 times 2 is 16 plus 4 gives me 20 again, or another 0. Carry the 2. Now I do 8 times 5 is 40.
40 plus 2 would be 42.
Okay. Plus 2 gives me 42. And then I have to carry my 4 up above the 6. 8 times 6 is 48. Plus 4, 52. So I write down my 2 below, and then I put my 5 up above my 3. 8 times 3 plus 5 is 29. Now because it's at the end, we write them both down. Does that look familiar to people? You guys are good on those steps?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I expected. Now, I always just moved over one and just started right here for my next number. I'm seeing that a lot of you guys put a 0 in there. I'm okay with either. Should I put the 0 in? Is that what you guys learned before? Okay. So then you put a 0 here. And now we do the exact same thing, but we do this number times each of those, right? Now, if this is an 8, it should be the exact same as what we have here, just shifted 1 to the left. Agreed?
Yep.
So I'm going to save a little bit of time and say, all right, so I have my 0, 0, 2, 2, 9, 2, if I'm kind of reading from right to left. And I just took and copied, okay, this 0 goes right there, this 0 there, 2, 2, this 2 goes there, 9, and 2. Sound familiar?
Yep.
All right, now we put how many zeros at the end?
3. 2.
We'll do 2, because we had this 0 added in when we did our second 8. So now our third number here, we have 2 zeros in. Now, I like these. When it's 1 times each of these, you can just copy that same number, right? So 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 5 is 5 again. 1 times 6. 1 times 3. So we have all these. Now we take all these and we add them up. So 0 plus 0 plus 0? 0. 0 plus 0 plus 0?
Zero.
2 plus 0 plus 5?
Seven.
2 plus 2 plus 2?
Six.
6. 9 plus 2 is 11, plus 5 is 16. So now I have a 6 and I carry my 1. I always looked at those as, okay, 9 plus 1 gives me 10. Then I have the 2 plus 6. So I get 18. And then I get a 6. So this is kind of the math, the way you guys have been doing it for years. You're probably feeling pretty proficient, right? Now, unfortunately, something I didn't mention before is this section when it says, hey, multiply these numbers together. On the quiz, on the test, I'm going to be asking you to do it without a calculator, kind of this method. So you probably should do that in the homework for practice as well. But now we only have one final thing to do. We did this first kind of bullet point. We multiplied like normal. But now the decimal point in the answer, the number of decimal places in the answer, is going to be the same as the number of decimal places up above. So here I have how many decimal places?
4.
Nope, here I have 2 for my 2 and my 5. Here I have 2. So the total decimal places before is 4. So then I take and I need to have 4 decimal places here. So my decimal point has to go right there.
686.670.
Yep, so 686.67. You could write the zeros if you wanted to, but because they're at the end, they're not really needed. But are you with me
Yeah.
on those? So that's that. Do we need practice in doing that?
No, that's good.
Maybe let me do this then if we're not going to practice doing it. I'm going to say my second example, and we won't work all the way through it. I'm just going to say it's 4.28 times 3.7. And if I were to do all the steps, I'd get 2996, put a 0 on the bottom, and then I'd have 1284. Then I add those together, and I get a 6 and a 3 and an 8 and a 5 and a 1. The decimal point, this is the part I really wanted to do now. The decimal point has to go between which of those numbers in the answer? Hank?
One, Dave, because there's 2 decimal places in the 28, and then 1 decimal place in the 7, so 3 overall.
Yep.
And then you'll just move over this line 3 times in the answer.
Exactly. So he sees that you have 2 and 1, 2 decimal places, 1 decimal place, total of 3. So we need to have 3 decimal places in our answer. So that would be our answer. We okay on those?
Yeah.
So that's the multiplication. You multiply just like normal, and then you just say, all right, number of decimal places in the answer, same as the total number of decimal places in the original. If I were to jump down to Roman numeral 2 then, so you could say Roman numeral 2, we want to do the same sort of thing, but now we're doing division, so dividing with decimals.
I do not like dividing this.
You're going to love it this time.
Oh, great. Oh.
Actually, that is kind of true. I know for me, sometimes teachers have tried to teach me something, and I fail miserably at it, and then it comes back a year or two later, and suddenly it clicks. For me, that happened with English grammar. Finally, freshman year in college, I understood it. Where in high school, I just couldn't figure it out. So. Okay, here we go. The key to dividing with decimals is you move the decimals. Really awkward. I'm going to put an emphasis on that letter S. So move the decimals. You need to move them both to reach the long division sign, and then solve like normal. And that might not be insanely clear, so we'll do an example, and I think the example will kind of help clear things up. So if I were to try this one first, so say I have 15.05 divided by 3.5. So 15.05 divided by 3.5. If I'm going to take and put that into like the long division problem, what goes inside that bracket? What has to go over here? My 3.5 or my 15.05? Yep, 15.05. Then that second number, the divisor, goes out in front, 3.5. So the part in pink up here, move the decimals to reach that thing. Technically, we're only moving this first decimal to reach it, but I have to move this 1 point to get over to the long division sign, right? But if I take and move this one, technically it's kind of like I'm taking 3.5 and multiplying by 10. If I multiply the 3.5 by 10, I have to multiply the 15.05 by 10. So in other words, this decimal place kind of goes over to here, and this decimal place then also goes over 1.
And then would you?
And then once you have that, you go and you copy in your answer. That decimal point is going to end up being like right up above there in the answer. All right, now we have 35. 35 goes into 150 how many times? Push comes to shove, you could try different numbers. You could count it on your fingers. 35 times 2 is 70, plus 35 is 105, plus 35 again would be 140. So 3.5 times 4 gives me 140. And if you'd rather, some people, they just go off on the side and they do, all right, 35 times, and they try different numbers, and so it's kind of up to you. If I can count multiples, I often do because that's faster for me, and I'll sometimes even use my fingers like I did there to 1 multiple, 2 multiples, 3 multiples. All right, so then I take 140 away from my 150, so I get 10. We copy down the 5, so I have 105. That's 35 times 3, yep. Because we had 35, then we had 70, then we had 105. So I put my 3 there. I have a 105. If I subtract, I get none left. So my final answer is going to be 4.3 right up there. Does that work for the first example?
Yep.
Then second and last example. Same sort of thing, but a little bit more ugly. I mean, a more fun one. If I were to do 728.14 divided by 4.2, it'd be smart too. It'd be smart too. But I don't plan to hunt you down like a small woodland creature if you don't do it. But so 728.14, and I have a 4.2. Perhaps a problem with my examples is in both cases you're just moving the decimal point one place, but sometimes you're going to have to move it 2 places or 3 places to get it to where it needs to be. Agreed? So kind of at least be warned about that. All right, so we move them both 1 again. You can carry your decimal point up above. So we have 42 now. I can't erase that decimal point right here. That's why it's still there. So 42. So 42 times 2 is going to be 80.
84.
So that's already too big. So we can only do 1 time. So we'll have a 42. And we get 30. Carry down the 8 gets me 308, right? I would probably, if I were here, I'd probably actually try, like, you could do multiples of 42. I'm going to guess 42 times 8. It's supposed to be a little multiplication sign. Because 420 would be times 10, and I'm guessing it's about 84 less than that is my 308. So 8 times 2 is 16. Then I have 33. Still too big, isn't it? So if it's not 8, it has to be a 7, right? So I could do 42 times 7, or I could say, all right, 7 is just going to be 1 less than that, 142 less. So I have a 4 and a 290. So you should get that same 294 if you did 42 times 7. And now when I subtract, I have a 4 and a 1. So 14. Now I can copy down my 1. So 141. I think that should be a 3, right?
Yes.
And somewhere off on the side, 42 times 3 gives me 126. Okay, so that's looking reasonable, 126. So if I take away that, I get 11 up on top, and that becomes a 3. So 15, is that what other people had? 15, then I have to copy down my last number. So I copy down this 4. 154. Hoping that works out normally. So 42 times 3 over here gave me 126. So if I add on another 42, I get 168. That's not going to work. Bummer. So it looks like we have to have a 3 up on top. And 3. And this is going to give me 126. So I could borrow from my 5. That becomes a 4. This becomes a 14. 14 minus 6 is 8. 28. So now we're kind of out of numbers, right? What's the last step? What do we do next?
Decimal.
Yep, because we haven't had a remainder of 28 so far, we need to start adding zeros in there. So you could say, all right, I have a 0 there, carry it down. So we have 280. So we're going to try to figure out, does this decimal repeat? Does the decimal stop somewhere? And so if I have a 280, all right, so right over here I had a 294. That was times 7. So it's going to have to be a 6, isn't it? And you could do 6 times 42. You could say, all right, 3 times 42 is that, so 6 times 42 is going to be double that, right? So find a way that works for you. Maybe the way I'm doing it is kind of like, what? But it's going to be 252. So minus 252. I'm hoping, and that was with a 6. So let me squeeze up here and write in a 6. And it's kind of getting to be a real pain with the screen the way I have it. So I have 8, because I borrowed, that gives me a 7, this gives me a 10, and then I have a 2. Okay, good. So I see right here I have a 28, which is the same as what I had right there, agreed? So if I keep adding zeros to the end like I did right up above, I'm going to keep getting the same thing over and over again. So it'll become 173.3 with a 6 repeating. So we do the little line over the 6, agreed? So final answer, 173.3 with a repeating 6 there on the end. Any questions on those? Okay.